Welcome to another installation of N Still Boxing. I'm your host, Guy McKinnon. Ever wondered how boxing in Australia and the Southern Hemisphere works? Who it goes through? Well, let's take a deep dive, or a dive in general, into how this works in Australia. We have some pretty good boxers down here, okay? We've had a surge, a resurgence, and a renaissance of boxing. So essentially there's three tiers of boxing, three tiers of promotions. The major players are number one, No Limit. Now this is Matt Rose and George Rose, and these guys run No Limit Boxing. These guys are based out of Sydney, and they have some pretty big fighters like Tim Tszyu, Nikita Tszyu, and they have a monopoly on the boxing at the moment for the meantime, but this is changing, as you're going to find out later on in the video. But what it is, they have a contract, an exclusive contract with Main Event and Foxtel KO Sports, where they deliver a certain amount of boxing events to Australia every year. And they have some really top tier promotions, all right? And their game tree, if you will, and there's a few ways that you can go about it, and a few ways that these Southern Hemisphere promoters from Australasian promoters, should I say, the ones from Australia and New Zealand, that they go down. So you have one with No Limit, all right? They've got the Foxtel, they've got the Tim Tszyu, and they go to PBC, Premier Boxing Championships in America, and it really gives their fighters exposure to that American audience. All right, that's their game tree, really, in that direction. Or you have someone that's always been a big promoter, but has really, really exploded in recent times, should I say, and that's Tasman Fighters, based up in Queensland. Now, these guys are led by Mick Francis, and they have some really big promoters and their global partners that they work with to make Australian fighters really big. Their marquee guy is iopetaia, and iopetaia is the cruiserweight champion of the world and probably the best cruiserweight out there, and such a big hype around his name right now. And if you see our previous videos, we've seen him, we've met him a few times, we've done a few interviews. The guy's a beast, built different. However, their game tree is kind of different, if you will. Their way of getting to the big audiences is slightly different in the sense that these guys have gone down the DAZN route. All right, so you go Tasman Fighters, Mick Francis, they're now, getting all the local talent. They've got some really interesting fighters. I'm talking Justice Hooney. I'm talking Tera Moana Jr., the Olympian, and iopetaia, as I mentioned before. But these guys have gone down the route of the Riyadh season and the DAZN, and then the Matchroom Boxing. So their global partner is Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing. So when they're getting to that global stage, they're putting all their fights on DAZN, which is becoming one of the biggest platforms, if not the biggest platform for boxing in the world at the moment. The other guys I want to mention are Duco events or Duco Boxing. Now, these guys are based out of New Zealand with David Higgins. Now, these guys pretty much get all your Kiwis, and if you're coming out of New Zealand, the biggest guys that you can go with is Duco events, Duco Boxing, with Mr. Higgins here. Now, these guys have a similar game tree as Tasman Fighters, where they're on DAZN, and then through DAZN, they're going to Matchroom Boxing. Now, that's not to say that they're exclusive with any of these. However, that's their close partnerships. They're obviously all willing to work together. I've seen guys like Connor Wallace, for example, fight on the No Limit cards, and there's some cross-promotion there. However, that's kind of like the general feel and idea where these guys are going in two separate routes. The second, tier, if you will, these guys are the rising promotions and the legacy promotions that we have here in Australia. Now, they don't have all the big money and the really, really big backings like these other three guys, right? Tasman Fighters, Duco Boxing, and No Limit. However, these guys are fundamental in the functioning of Australian boxing and Southern Hemisphere boxing. So you have J&I Promotions, who operate across all Australia and do a lot of combat sports. You have the rising promotions out of Sydney, Wanderer Promotions, with Ricky Colosimo, who's putting on some really, really interesting and very fantastic events. Then you have Thornbury Promotions with guys such as David Nika, and they've had Alex Leopai in the past as well. So this organisation with Noel Thornbury have had some fundamental parts to keep Australian boxing alive and thriving. And also Ace Boxing from Queensland. Now, this guy is known as the grandfather of boxing. And the godfather of boxing, should I say, not the grandfather. And if you want a good fighter to come out and fill the cards of, say, No Limit or something like that, all right, we need a good opponent for this up-and-coming guy, you go to him. He's going to get you some very interesting fighters, if you will. And these guys really put on some good local shows. They nurture the up-and-coming talent and give the ability for these guys to become true professionals. Because in Australia and across the world in general, only very few fighters have the ability to be full-time fighters, full-time boxers, and that's exclusively their job. A lot of them, what they have to do is work another job, be it a trainer and whatever it may be, but they often are semi-professional in the sense of that's not their exclusive jobs. So these types of promotions, and obviously if you get a big contract, one of the big three, you have the ability to really shoot to the top. If we have missed anyone, that's no disrespect. They all play really key roles as well. So apologies, and comment below if I have missed anyone here, and I do apologize. But hey, I appreciate you all, what you're doing for the sport. Now, the fundamental part of boxing is the broadcasting. Okay, the broadcasting of it. Otherwise, it doesn't get out to the Australian public. Okay, and now what's happened is fallen to the 7th, maybe 8th largest sport in Australia. Now it's competing against things like cricket. Even the UFC is quite large and very, very popular in Australia. The NRL, even like say American football was on the rise here. Probably not quite as popular as boxing, but I think it's because it was hidden behind a paywall for a very, very long time. If you want to watch a big fight in America, you have to then pay for it. And a lot of it wasn't free to air. But I think a lot of broadcasting companies have sensed that we want to lower the prices and make it as free as possible. Now, we're speaking to Eddie Hearn a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that, listen, the potential of boxing in Australia is huge. Okay, we can promote this, but it needs to be free. It needs to be easily accessible. And the more champions that we have, the more popular it becomes. And we've seen that. Tim Tszyu is a huge draw. George Kambosos, when he was the champion, he sold out a stadium. We love our combat sports, but it has to be free and get to the more general population before it becomes one of the top, say, 5 sports in Australia. Now, there's some new players coming in. So Foxtel was the dominant force in Australian boxing for a long time, and through Main Event and KO as well. However, it has been recently acquired by DAZN. They've gotten a controlling percentage of it. Now, since it's been controlled now, I want to see how this changes the landscape of Australian boxing. Now, whether No Limit is going to be more on DAZN, or is it going to keep, KO is going to remain the boxing provider in Australia for a lot of fights? Only time will tell, and it'll be very interesting to see how this presents in the near future. DAZN, obviously, they're really pushing that for Australia. We've just had iopetaia fight on DAZN. It was behind a paywall, but it's been kept cheap. And Turki Al-Sheikh has kept it cheap, all right, to push it out to the public. And this is exactly what boxing needed. A lot of the American methodology and the Al Heyman, and this is in the news right now, that they kept pushing prices up more. But now boxing fans have had a taste of that cheaper price, or free on DAZN. It's going to cause a price war, a race to the bottom. We'll see how that pans out. Now, Stan Sport, which is essentially like a Netflix in Australia, they have been really investing and investigating this boxing thing on their platforms. And they've just had Akuso brothers fight on there, and Tyson Pedro was meant to fight on one of their shows. So apparently it broke a lot of records, and they have a lot of sport on Stan Sports already. So through that, they want to push it, and apparently it broke a lot of records on their own streaming channel. So that's only good things. A lot of people have Stan Sport to watch the rugby union, whatever it is. So they're going to see that as well and be very interested. Amazon Prime, which is pretty much a staple for a lot of people in sport. Amazon Prime, they had Tim Tszyu through boxing PBC. They had the Tim Tszyu versus Bakram Murtazalayev fight, and that was a legit big dog fight. That was a championship fight, and obviously didn't go away with Tim Tszyu, and we're not going to go into that right now, but that was a very good fight card. And that's just them going, hey, listen, we're interested in the sport. Was this going to pan out like? So if you want to watch that in Australia, you'd have to go watch it on Amazon Prime, and probably Main Event as well. Netflix, they've dunked into the sport a little bit with Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. We've done a video on that. I'm not a big fan of this influencer boxing. But the good thing to come from that, they had Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor did fight in that as well. So that was a really good platform for them. One of the most watched boxing events of all time, apparently. But Netflix is a large platform, again, with the same concept as Amazon Prime and Stan Sports. they're going ahead and looking at the sport, and it's growing, and people are getting interesting. Whether or not that Mike Tyson, Jake Paul fight was a positive for boxing, I'm not sure, and possibly not. A lot of people found it boring, but the Serrano and Taylor fight was apparently quite good. And on a final note there, with some of the broadcasters bringing it out to the general public, is Channel 7, which is a broadcasting channel in Australia. They've been known to cover some sports and do some fight nights. The onus is on the promoter. They'll get like a small amount, and they essentially put their fighters on a platform. They go on Channel 7, and I believe it's free to air. I'm not sure if it's on TV itself, but then they get to watch it and see that like local talent, and gives them, put them on a platform, get them more popular. Let's see what they have. Now, just for those who don't know, the regulation in Australia is the ANBF, the Australian National Boxing Federation. They cover all the professional bouts in Australia, and they've got their own titles and Australian titles and whatnot. And they go through they pretty much give everyone the licenses as well, and they force the rules and professional events and whatever it is. So that's just like a bit of reference point for you, the ANBF other guys. The second part of this, just want to reference this out there. Now, people think that Southern Hemisphere boxing is grade 2. And for a long time, I'd probably have to agree with it. For a long time, I feel like our guys did not really compete with the Northern Hemisphere guys, America, Ukraine's, Eastern European, if you will, and UK. But now, I tell you what, with that globalization, it might be globalization and whatever it may be, but that surge and that renaissance of Australian boxing is here. For example, in the 90s, we had a guy called Shannon Taylor. Okay, Shannon Taylor was from Bulli, Wollongong, New South Wales. Quite a good fighter, dominated everyone here, goes overseas. He eventually got a shot at Mosley, and he got dominated. Really, at the end of the day, he had a little bit of a decent fight, a couple of punches, but he was not on the same level. And Mosley is a Hall of Famer, but that's what I mean, that we couldn't really compete on that level. So, talking about the resurgence, I want to talk about all the guys that we have in Australia right now. All right, I'm going to talk just the surface level of people that we have, because I can't go into every single one. And apologies if I do miss you. Comment below if there's someone that we should watch out for. Very keen to know, and I'm always keen to investigate these new guys always coming through. But basically, to make this list, you had to be relatively active, a world champion, Olympian, or someone like that to kind of make it. But someone with the names out there. I want to give you this list. At heavyweight, we have Justice Hooney, the rising star. We have Joseph Parker. I know he's from New Zealand, but I'm going to include him in this. All right, he's about to fight for a heavyweight world title, and he was a heavyweight champion. We have Tera Moana Jr., who was in the Olympics. The guy is a towering nightmare and one hell of a boxer. Now, at Bridgerweight, we have Tyson Pedro. He's an ex-UFC star, but he's now transitioned to boxing in that in-between weight between heavyweight and cruiserweight. We have iopetaia, the absolute, probably the best cruiserweight in the world right now. Explosive, reigning star, top global star, Riyadh season representative, superstar of Australia. At light heavyweight, we have Austin Asuko and Paulo Asuko. Two talented brothers building their reputation, very interesting. We have Connor Wallace. Connor Wallace at light heavyweight also. He's the Irish-Australian, but he's fighting out of Brisbane, I think, at the moment. And I tell you what, he is in line for some big fights. Eddie Hearn was talking about him. A lot of people were talking about him. He's causing some disturbances in the light heavyweight division. At super middleweight, we have Callum Peters, a young talent on the rise who was an Olympian. The dude's a talent. He's only had one fight right now, but it's a name to watch out for. At super welterweight, we obviously have Tim Tszyu, all right, who's coming off a loss, but he's going to have that resurgence. We're going to see where his career will take him. We have Nikita Tszyu also, the younger brother, who's all action. Put some amazing fights on there, so he's always very exciting to watch. At 140, at light welterweight, we have the former champion Liam Paro, who's still there. He's with Matchroom right now. There's going to be some interesting things coming from him. We have George Kambosos, the former champion. He's come up to 140. George Kambosos, he was a former unified lightweight champion, and now he's fighting at 140, so he's a superstar. He's sold out stadiums. He's fought all the best guys. He's never ducked. At super bantamweight, we have Sam Goodman. Sam Goodman was meant to fight Inoue, but sadly, he's got the cut, and now that his plans have been derailed in this spot. However, he was right there at the top of that division, ready to fight the monster. We're going to have to see where his career is going to take him, but he's right there at the top, globally known name. And at bantamweight, we have Ebony Bridges, obviously known for her rowdy attire when weighing in, but she was very popular. She was quite a good fighter, quite all action, and she's had a few knockouts of her opponents, and very popular in the UK, and not quite as popular here in Australia, but hey, very interesting. And at featherweight, we have the world champion, Skye Nicholson. She's skilled, she's charismatic, and she has that international recognition. So she is, again, another star. And can she be beaten right now with that high IQ and that jab and that footwork? Once she gets your timing, it's all over. We'll see. Now, from the Powerhouse promotion to some really interesting boxing, broadcasting, expansion, I feel like Australian boxing's never been in a better place. We have the eyes of the world on us right now, and I feel like there's only going to be growth out of it. That renaissance has really started with George Kambosos, who was the catalyst of this resurgence of Australian boxing. He brought so many big fights here, and to this day, I feel like in 10, 15 years, that's going to generate another world champion. I stand by that. Where do you think Australian boxing is going? Do you think it's better than ever, or is there another era that you think Australian boxing was better at? You let me know. This is N Still Boxing. I'm Guy McKinnon, and until next time.
Thank you for listening.